Mhm.
Noon. I'm the Reverend Dr. Leah Lewis, and I am the founder and executive producer of the Great Lakes African American Writers Conference. Welcome to our third installment. We are thankful to the Hines Endowment, the Cleveland Foundation and its Annisville Wolf Book Funds, the East Cleveland Public Library, the August Wilson House, and all of our sponsors for making this private Great Lakes African American Writers Conference Colloquium with Miss Pearl Cleage possible. Indeed, GLAAWC, which is what we call the conference, is grateful to all of our sponsors and partners. Please visit www.glaawc.us for additional information and to see our full slate of sponsors and partners. I must, however, also highlight all of our institutional partners: the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, the Cleveland School of the Arts, Manchester Academic Charter School of Pittsburgh, Kent State University, the College of Arts and Science, and its Wick Poetry Center, Case Western Reserve University's English Department, and the North Coast District of the National Speech and Debate Association. Thank you all. Let me tell you a little bit about our featured speaker today, Miss Pearl Cleage. Pearl Cleage is an Atlanta-based writer whose works include 3 novels: What Looks Like Crazy on an Ordinary Day, I Wish I Had a Red Dress, and Some Things I Never Thought I'd Do. A dozen plays, including Flying West, Blues for an Alabama Sky, Hospice and Bourbon at the Border, 2 books of essays, Mad at Miles, A Black Woman's Guide to Truth and Deals with the Devil and Other Reasons to Riot, and a book of short fiction, The Brass Bed and Other Stories. She is also a performance artist, collaborating frequently with her husband, Zarin W. Burnett Jr., under the title Live at the Club Zebra. The two have performed sold-out shows at both the National Black Theater Festival in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and the National Black Arts Festival in Atlanta, Georgia. Ms. Cleage is a frequent contributor to anthologies and has been featured recently in Proverbs for the People, contemporary African American fiction, edited by Tracy Price Thompson and Teresa Stovall, and in Mending the World, Stories of Family by contemporary black writers, edited by Rosemarie Robotham. She is the contributing writer to Essence magazine, and in 1989, her novel, What Looks Like Crazy on an Ordinary Day, was an Oprah Book Club pick and spent 9 weeks on the New York Times bestsellers list. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the special human being, sweet to her core, Miss Pearl Cleage.
Thank you so much. And hello from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm so happy to be with you today and to share some thoughts about writing and about this American moment. Zoom will never replace the fellowship that can only happen when we're all in the same room together, but we're going to do the best we can. Before we get started, let's see if we can all get on the same breath. Close your eyes for a minute. Now breathe in and slowly breathe out. Breathe in and slowly breathe out. Breathe in and slowly breathe out. Life is a big sea, full of many fish. I let down my nets and pull. Open your eyes and listen to the words of Langston Hughes. Melodramatic, maybe it seems to me now, he wrote, but then it was like throwing a million bricks out of my heart. When I threw the books into the water, I leaned over the rail of the SS Malone and threw the books as far as I could out into the sea. All the books I had had at Columbia and all the books I had lately bought to read. The books went down into the moving water in the dark off Sandy Hook. Then I straightened up, turned my face to the wind, and took a deep breath. I was a seaman going to sea for the first time, a seaman on a big merchant ship. And I felt nothing would ever happen to me again that I didn't want to happen, wrote Langston Hughes. I felt grown, a man, inside and out, 21. I was 21. How could he have known that so many years later, when I arrived breathless and amazed in Atlanta, Georgia, I would feel that same sense of exhilaration? I was 20. And while my life was at that moment in a state of glorious confusion, I knew one thing for sure. I intended to be a writer. And now, 50 plus years later, that's exactly what I am, a writer. And I share with Langston Hughes not only a lifelong love of the careful arrangement of words on paper, but an abiding love for people. Like Langston, I believe that life is a big sea, full of many fish. Like Langston, it is my joy to let down my nets and pull. The tradition I embrace goes back to ancient campfires, where we gathered together to share the stories that would bind us together as a community of people. It was through our stories told and retold in every generation that we defined what a woman was, what a man was, how they should behave, and what we would call courage. It was in our stories of love and loss that we learned to appreciate the preciousness of life, the importance of our families, and our common humanity. I think that's still where it begins, in our stories. Since I know many of you are already writing, I want to say a few words about the writer's role and a few words about the writer's tools. Then I want to share a short piece with you that will show you what happens when it all comes together. Let's start with the writer's role, the writer's job. When people ask us what we do and we say we're writers, what do we mean? Number of books published, number of plays produced, number of poetry slams from which we emerged victorious. Those may be part of this life we've chosen, but they are only external judgments and measures made by people who are on the outside looking in. People who want to determine our success or failure as writers by the money our work generates in the literary or theatrical or cinematic marketplace. They talk about whether our book landed on the New York Times bestseller list, and if it did, how long. They ask us if we sold it to the movies and how much we got for the movie rights. They want to know if our play went to Broadway and how many performances it had before the final curtain. But even as we answer their questions, spoken and unspoken, we know those things don't really have anything to do with writing. In fact, thinking about that stuff too often is the fastest way to bring on a serious case of writer's block. Because none of that has anything to do with why most of us opened up a laptop and typed in chapter 1 or act 1, scene 1, or the first line of the first poem we ever wrote. The reason we decided to be writers was not to get rich and famous, but because we wanted to get at the truth by telling stories. We wanted to figure out how to get human beings down on paper, talking the way they really talk and walking the way they really walk. We wanted to send those characters on complicated journeys, both internal and external, that would make our audiences want to come along because they would recognize themselves in the stories we were spinning. Because that is one of our most important jobs, to recognize the full range of humanity in all its complicated specificity and then reflect it back as truthfully as we can. And not just the truth of the factual universe, but the universe of the heart, the landscape of the soul. We wanted to show us, to us, in all our complex beauty, and terribleness, and in the process see ourselves more clearly too. That's why we started writing in the first place. And when we do it right, people always recognize the gift we're offering, and they are eager to receive it. Because that exchange between writer and reader is precious and fragile, built on someone trusting us to get it right and our promise that we will. Because we understand that truth always needs a soldier. That's another one of our most important jobs. Be that soldier. Because even when the truth is hard to bear, it's never as hard as a lie. Any lie, every lie. That's why we have to work so hard to see things clearly, to understand people deeply. And the only way to do that is to study them. A writer must study human beings the way astronomers pay attention to the stars and ballerinas strive to perfect their grand jetés. In order to do that work, we have to develop a writer's eye and a writer's ear, and to be constantly on the lookout for the small details that reveal a character's specificity. Who is this man? What is this woman acting this way? How did they meet each other, and where are they going? As a child growing up in Detroit, my sister and I often rode the bus together. While she looked out the window or tried to read without getting nauseous, I would eavesdrop on the conversations of the other riders and make notes in a small notebook I carried for that purpose. I was learning how to write dialogue, how to make my characters sound like real people. I was also learning about plot and motive and the endlessly creative ways women found to describe their disappointment in one man or another, including an unforgettable woman who turned to her friend and said, "The thing is, any man who would do that is lower than a dirty, yellow, egg-sucking dog." Wow. I wrote that down. But even now, I haven't found a play or a novel I can put it in. But I will. Because as a writer, I use everything I see and everything I hear and everything I can imagine. Keeping a journal helps me remember the details of a day, an hour, a moment in time. This is critical to doing our job well, so that when the time comes to write a piece about hard times, and America is in the midst of hard times, and the winter will be worse, I have already been looking and listening and feeling and searching. I will be able to remember the young woman who approached me at a stoplight begging for money to feed her baby, because I wrote it down in my journal so I wouldn't forget that baby's eyes, that mother's desperation, so I could remember what it was she said to remind me of our shared humanity. I write about that shared humanity a lot, because when we forget it, we are doomed to be less compassionate, less loving, less engaged. The short piece I'm going to share with you includes my encounter with that woman. It's about learning to see people, society, and our own selfishness sometimes want to make invisible. But we are writers, and these are our neighbors, our families, our friends. How can we pretend not to see them? How can we pretend not to be them? How can we not write about them so other people will see them too? So, it's another hot summer day, and I'm wondering whether I should stop and get some gas with the $5 that has to last me until payday. I'm broke, again. But my artist friend says being broke, even incessantly broke, isn't the same as being free. I know he's right, but today the distinction is lost on me, and I'm just tired of worrying about money. The traffic is standing still on Lowry Street, and I'm debating turning off my motor until it starts moving again to save some gas. I already turned off the air conditioning to avoid overheating the motor and roll down the window on the driver's side, hoping for something other than the hot, gritty air that greets me. I sigh, dreaming beach dreams, and use the stalled traffic moment to look hopefully into my wallet one more time, to see if that final five has magically more a couple of tens and a 20 or two. So even if I can't get to the beach, I might be able to swing dinner at my favorite Mexican restaurant if I don't order a margarita. That's when I see her. She's walking between the two lanes of stopped traffic, pausing at each tightly rolled up window. Not one of the drivers behind me gives her the time of day. She doesn't tap on their windows or wave at them through the glass. She just slows down a little and glances in their direction. Receiving no response, she keeps moving. She's young, maybe 20, and she's thin, very thin. My mind provides a reason: drugs. But she doesn't look like a drug addict. There's none of the jittery desperation and cracked-lip con artist charm that defines that doomed tribe of urban wanderers. The closer she gets to my rearview mirror, the more I think drugs have nothing to do with this woman's journey. She isn't thin because she'd rather get high than eat. This woman is thin because her choices don't include eating. The well-groomed woman in the shiny brown BMW behind me shakes her head firmly without looking around and holds up a well-manicured hand. Even from where I'm sitting, the gesture is dismissive, disapproving, and judgmental. It says, "Be gone. You are not my problem." But now she's at my window, and realizing it's open, she leans down slightly to look me in the eye. That's when I realize she's holding a little kid, a baby. "Can you let me have some spare change?" she says. "I'm just trying to feed my kid." "I'm sorry," I say, wishing I'd rolled up the window so this encounter wouldn't be quite so close. "I don't have any money." She straightens up then, adjusts the baby on her hip and looks at me. "You got money," she says quietly. "You're driving, ain't you? You're living inside, ain't you? How come you can't spare me some change to feed my kid? You wouldn't let her go hungry if she belonged to you." And for the first time, I look directly at the tiny baby, clinging to her mother for dear life because you only get one mama, and she got this one, who must thrust her in the face of strangers as proof of need and worth and connection. You wouldn't let her go hungry if she belonged to you. And I look at the baby, who looks right back, without tears or expectations. A horn blows behind me, and I know we're holding up progress, but I realize she's right. What would I do if that baby belonged to me? And the answer is so simple. I'd feed her. Somehow, some way, I'd try everything I knew and do anything I had to do to feed her, even try and convince strangers my perfect child was worthy of feeding, deserving of what it takes to live and grow strong in the richest country in the world. I'd feed her, which is all her mother is trying to do. What could I do but thrust at that mother my last $5 and wave apologetically at that woman behind me who thought she had more important things to do than wait for me and this young mother to complete our exchange, who still didn't understand that she needed to slow down long enough and open that window wide enough to hear the question we must all answer. What would you do if she belonged to you? Because there is a path, there is a way, there is a sound, there is an eye to see, an ear to hear, a brain to know, and a heart to lead the way. There is a path that leads from me to you, from you to me, and back again and round about and in and out. There is a path from heart to heart, from hand to hand, and that path runs between us like a river. In that moment, we realize there is no us, and then there is only us and us. Thank you. And now we're going to be joined by some wonderful young poets who are going to introduce themselves and then share some of their work with us. I'm so happy to meet them and to hear their work as they start on their writer's journey. So can you introduce yourselves to us and then share some of your work? We can't wait to hear it.
Hello, my
Hello.
name is Layla Shotwell, and I attend Cleveland School of the Arts. Uh, this poem that I will be reading is called Complacency. Thank you. I'm exhausted, slaved away to the age-old cycle of maturity, unsure of the destination my whistle will blow, particles floating into an abyss only to find its way to the ground. I'm tired, pressed against the curb, my body aches, body quakes, body shakes, trembling underneath your shattered gaze. I'm stuck in the cycle of clouded hate, but let me stop and get back to what's at stake. I'm debilitated, bruised and blistered where it hurts the most, my mind, scarred by the white noise that plays every night, Channel 8 news, sputtering and coughing, choking on the oxygen that fills my world, polluted with toxins spewed from your corrupted ideologies. I grip onto the gravel as your knees snap my freedom in half, and now I'm yours. Take my hand in marriage until death do us part, but that won't last for long, will it? As death does me part, and you have broken my heart and my trust, but let me stop and step back into my place, the sunken place, sunken into your shackles that forced me into my place, complacent with the tragedies you have bestowed upon me, upon us. I can't sit back and let you spit in my face. I'm weak. There's nothing I can do. I'm just a kid. Everyone tells me to stay in my place of complacent abuse. I'm just a kid. I am of no use. I sit around writing for a change I'm not even allowed to change. Static movement in my brain, a dynamic progression that's hard to move. Shackled in the cuffs of maturity, unable to break free until 9 plus 9. I wish that y'all would listen, but it's all no use. I'm just a kid. Thank you.
That was wonderful. You are a wonderful writer. Don't ever let anybody tell you you don't have power, because you do. You put words together. Don't stop. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Ms. Clegg, thank you so much for your words before. I'm Elizabeth Tellich. I'm the Director of Creative Writing at Cleveland School of the Arts. That was Layla Shotwell. She's our senior. And then up next, I think we have Deontay Steele, and he is a current junior.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Deontay Steele. This is my poem, The Eyes Are Watching God. Empty beaches reveal eyes, faint baby blue sky, starless, creep in the night. Joy fills my head like trees in the forest. The swing stands still, in shrubs of the backyard, cars pass by like bullets through a man. The lights dim as thoughts do, surround sound veers, beers left on the highway. Pale concrete with sidewalk chalk, faded memories washed away like the scars on my wrist. I sit in a hammock, drinking Sunny D and watching the dog chase his tail. The grass is green as white watermelons, ready to be devoured by children with chunky hands and greedy, deep-slitted eyes bigger than their bellies. Sloppy mouths fed by the barbecue we waited all day for. This is tradition. Thank you.
That was wonderful. I love that you have so many details in there that let us go into the scene, that we can see that. We can see that dog. We can see the people gathering. Both of you have such a wonderful facility with the words that you choose and the rhythm that you choose. So I cannot wait to see what you're going to do on this journey, because y'all are already writers. Whatever people tell you from now on, when people ask you what you do and what you are, the first thing I want you to say is, I'm a great writer, and I want you to work hard so you'll believe it. I thank you so much for sharing those pieces. We need your words in this moment now more than ever. So talk, and talk loud, and don't stop talking, because if you don't talk, those of us who've been talking are going to keep talking. We need new voices. We need you. Those were wonderful. Thank you. And work hard on your writing. You're already good, and you all are going to be very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have others coming, or can we talk? Let me just ask you, you two writers, until they stop us. Do you feel optimistic about your country today, about what's going on around you as you're growing up? And how old are you?
I am 16.
You're 16, and how old are you?
I'm 17.
You're 17. So that's why you were talking about the 9 and the 9, so you can be 18, right? Yeah. So do you feel optimistic about what we're handing you as a country right now?
Layla, you can go first. Or if you want.
Not really, but there's always room for improvement to get better. That's what my generation is here for. We're here to make the world be better. And seeing as
You know what?
this is what we're given, we have a lot of work to do, but I'm positive that things can get better for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I am optimistic, but like in the way Layla said, I'm only optimistic if we're in charge, kind of. I feel like the people who have been in power for so long have messed it up for so long that they're like set in that the only way to truly change is to get them out of here. I think we need a total reset, and it's going to be chaotic, but I feel like that's the only thing that's really going to help us at this point.
Do you believe voting is a good way for people to make those changes that you're talking about, to get the people out that aren't doing what you think they should do and get the people in? Do you look forward to being old enough to vote?
Yes.
Yes, but I also feel like sometimes, I don't know, I kind of like believe in like the government conspiracy things. So I'm just like, I feel like they can always, trick us in it. I feel like some things that they put out to us is kind of like tricks, like they're tricking us thinking that things are good and they're not. I feel like if they wanted us to, I feel like the only way to truly make change is to take the power into our hands and stop using the system that they already created, because that system hasn't been helping at all.
Mm-hmm. Do you talk about that, about what kind of system we should put in place that would work better? Do you try to think about what that might look like?
Yeah, but I feel like I can only get so far because I'm very like imaginative. I don't use my logic very much.
That's a good thing though, because I think that's part of why writers are so important. It's because we got a lot of people, especially in public life, who are all about the logic. They always talk about the logic, and the thing that writers can do is talk about the feelings. How do we feel? What does it feel like to be free? And how much are we going to give up and struggle to be free? And the fact that both of you are cautiously optimistic is a good thing, because you have to be optimistic to stay engaged, don't you? Because if you're totally pessimistic, you won't stay engaged, you won't vote, and you won't demonstrate, and you won't come into the street to show how many of us there are. And I think all those things are important. I think voting is very important. I think being in the street so people can see numbers is very important. And I think for writers, it's important to write about what's going on right now, how you feel right now, how you claim the power in what you're doing right now, because we're all exhausted. We all feel like, oh, not another day. There's going to be something terrible. What's going to happen? But the thing is, when you feel that way, you have to stop and say to yourself, okay, let me breathe. I'm going to breathe in. I'm going to breathe out. I have the power. I'm going to use the power. I have the power. I'm going to use the power. And just say it to yourself as you breathe, because we have to remember that we have the power. There's always more good people. than there are people who are not good. But good people get tired. They get afraid. They fall in love and get distracted and all those things that we do. So it's like you have to make sure that you don't get distracted. You know, if you fall in love, take that person with you to the demonstration. You know, if you find somebody that's going to teach you something, make sure you get them to go to the polls if they're old enough to vote. Because the more ways you can stay engaged at the age that you are, the more when you get older, you'll continue to do it. So that you'll say, okay, I need somebody in Congress like me, and you'll decide to run, you know, and then you want somebody in the Senate, you will decide to run. And I'm going to stay around long enough to vote for one of y'all for president. You can do it. I need you. You can't do any worse than what we've been doing. So just think about it. Do you have any questions for me?
Is Chris still on there? Tell him to put his, can you communicate with him and tell him to put his camera on? Yes, if you all have any questions for Ms. Clegg, please go ahead and pose them.
Okay, what was your journey as a publisher?
I'm sorry, I'm hearing several voices.
Tell both of them to put their camera
Go ahead,
on
I'm sorry.
and get engaged.
Okay. Your journey as a publisher, how
Okay.
was that?
So
I know
it'll
it's
just
not
be the
easy.
5 of
For
us.
sure.
You mean getting books
And
published?
can I get something other than
It's
green
because I
screen?
also published a magazine, but you mean in terms of
Oh,
writing a book and getting
okay.
it published.
Yeah.
It's
Don't worry about
difficult to
it.
do
So I can
if you
moderate
do
from
it in
here
the
on out.
traditional way,
'Cause
which is what I
they
did.
could
I had
hear me.
an agent, I had a publisher who was in New York, which is wonderful in terms of getting your work distributed. But you all have so many more tools at your command to self-publish. The internet is a huge place for communication. You know, you write a book and then you go on a book tour. You go to a bookstore and 30 people will come out to hear you. And it's so great. And then 50 people will come out and hear you. But you all can use the tools that you have and communicate with 1,000 people. You can communicate with so many people so that there is that traditional route where you need an agent, someone who can take your work and present it to a big publisher in the traditional way. But also think about publishing something online. Think about self-publishing. Think about other creative ways to communicate with the people that you like. How do the people that you know get their information? Do they read books or do they read things online? You know, so that if you're trying to communicate with your group and most of what they do is online, then think about how you can put your work there, maybe in smaller chunks. If your people communicate more live, think about doing theater. Think about doing these poems in front of actual people. And if you want to go the traditional route, what you have to do is get an agent who will take that manuscript to the publisher, because most of the times they won't accept it. If you just send it and say, this is a great book, you should read it, they can't do it because they get millions of submissions. So that I would encourage you to think about new ways to communicate. Before I started publishing with a New York publisher, I had a very small publisher, Broadside Press, in Detroit, Michigan, where I grew up. I published with Third World Press in Chicago. And I also published some of my own work. My husband and I published our own work, went on book tours, put those books in the trunk of the car, and went any place anybody would let us read and read it. And that's really a tradition that you can embrace. Find the people that you're talking to and go to them. Don't wait for them to find you. You find them, because when they find you, they'll be so glad. When you find a writer you like, don't you love it? Don't you try to find out what else that person has written? Where's his poem? Where's her play? And that's what they'll do with you. So try to think about who you're writing for and then how you can touch them where they might be, where they are, wherever that is.
And Ms. Clegg, thank you so much for saying that, because Layla, I think you could speak for a minute on that, and Deontay, they've done so much self-publishing already, and I think there can be a stigma around that, like feeling like, and you spoke about that in your speech, that you haven't quite like made it, right, if you're not doing these larger scale projects. But Layla has published her own book already, multiple actually, and Deontay's published several books. And so they have already, like, as you said, they're already writers and have started making those moves and finding their audience and speaking to people. And their voice is already so important, right? And so
Exactly.
they're already on that route to finding people who their work speaks to and finding people and like bringing them in as an audience. So it is important to find that community through those various routes.
Yeah, and to bring whatever the new idea is, in addition to what the old path is, to see what else you can do. And you all are already self-publishing. I did a lot of that. You're already finding your readers, which I did for a long time, because it's really part of your job as a writer to do that. It's wonderful if you can just sit at home and write. Or, you know, in the movies, they always have these writers, they go to the beach, don't they? They have a beautiful beach house and they're sitting there writing. I've never had that experience. I sit right here in my house on the corner in Southwest Atlanta, and I watch my neighbors, and then I write down the stories that come to me. So don't think that you have to go the traditional route. You all are already doing the right thing. Publish your work, get it out there, because the more you can see it out there and let people respond, the more you'll write. Because that's the fun, is to get the exchange, isn't it?
Miss
Yeah.
Clay.
We've got Chris with us.
Yes.
Is that Chris down there? Hey, Chris.
How you doing? Sorry, my computer was acting up.
Oh, okay. Well, we're glad to see you. Maybe we'll be able to. Can you talk a little louder? Let's see if we can hear you too.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
All
Do you have a
right.
piece you want to share with us or a question?
To be honest, I kind of like just started. Like being a writer wasn't really like my goal, but I do understand what's going on in the world today, and I figured, you know, poetry could be a way that I can express my voice, because right now people aren't like, they're not listening, and all this inequality and racism and stuff is not acceptable. So I just wanted to be a voice, one of the young voices. Maybe people will listen to us. I just want to know how you like, have you ever gone out and protested and stuff, or like their poems publicly about whatever is going on right now?
Have I ever gone out and protested in demonstrations?
Yes.
Yes,
Like,
I have. My whole life, my whole life. I've been in demonstrations. I have picketed. I have marched in marches. I have gone to protest meetings, and I was always the person where they would say, okay, we need a poem for this. Can you write a poem for this mass meeting that we're going to hear? And I would do it. So that I've done a lot of that. And I think that protesting, that energy when you're out in the street with other people in a nonviolent, peaceful protest, is so important, because it feeds your work as a writer. So I've done a lot of that. I grew up in a family that was very involved in the civil rights movement. My father was very involved. He was a contemporary of Malcolm X and was a very active member of the civil rights community. So I've demonstrated my whole life. When I moved to Atlanta, same thing. I've marched for African-American rights as an African-American person. I've marched for women's rights as a woman. I've marched for voting rights as an American citizen. So I'm big on demonstrations, and I'm a little older now, so my knees aren't as good as they used to be, so I can't walk as far as I used to. But that's why I'm depending on you all, so that when I get to say, okay, Chris, I'm tired now. Now you have to do it. You'll be ready to step up and say, don't worry about it. I'm going to do it. Layla's going to do it. And then Deonta is going to do it. That's right, Deontay, because I know that you all will do it. But it's have you been in any demonstrations, Chris?
Not really.
How old are you?
I'm 13.
13. So you got time. You got time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you started writing now. Do you like it?
Yeah, it wasn't as hard as I thought it was. Like, I wanted to do it, but like I also didn't, because I thought it was gonna be like really hard. And like to think of stuff. So like,
once you started, it wasn't as hard as you thought.
Yeah, it's just
That's
like
great.
any other in the world.
Have you ever heard of a writer named Jason Reynolds?
Yeah,
He's a young. You have?
My class is reading a book called Stamped. Yo, this joint is good.
Yeah, he's a wonderful writer. He has a another book you might like called Ghost, which is really good, and another one called Long Way Down. And they're one is more a novel. The Ghost one is more a novel. Long Way Down is a story, but it's a poem. But it's really it's like somebody talking to you. It's not like, you know, when you think about it, it's going to be hard to write. Sometimes we think it's really hard to find our way into reading something too, because it's just not drawing us in. So I would encourage you to read some Jason Reynolds, all three of you actually, because his writing is really wonderful. And when I started reading him, I was so impressed with the way that he draws you in, that he talks just like we talk, you know, like real people. And I think that's what we're always trying to get to. So I think writing is only hard when you're trying not to be yourself, when you're trying to be somebody else. You know, when I started writing, people were talking about Alice Walker. I love Alice Walker. Talking about Toni Morrison. I love Toni Morrison. But I don't write that way. So that if I'm sitting in my own house and Alice Walker sitting on this shoulder, Toni Morrison sitting on this shoulder, I will have writer's block forever, because I'm not them. I have to figure out how to be my own voice, how to tell my own story. And all of you do too, because that's the thing. Alice is going to tell Alice. Toni would tell Toni, but only you can tell the stories that you have. Only I can tell the stories I have, because we all see people differently. We see things differently. And we have to be able to say, this is the mirror. This is what I saw when I looked at you, talking to the people that we love, the people that we want to be freer, to be safer. You know, this is what I see when I look at my people. And then let them look at what we see. And since we're going to be writing out of a deep investment in making things better, then what they will see is a vision. Even if we're writing about hard things, they'll see themselves. And that's always worthwhile, to see yourself more fully. And sometimes you do good stuff, and like all of us, sometimes we are not doing such good stuff. But you have to be able to look at yourself honestly, don't you? Because then you can write the truth. You can also be more sympathetic to other people. Once you admit that you're not perfect, and none of us are even close, but once you admit that, you can really love other people better, because you'll understand that they're imperfect too.
Yes, ma'am.
Miss Clegg, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You are a poet, an essayist, a novelist, and a playwright. There are not a lot of people who cross genres the way you do. Is this very natural and organic for you, or do you find it challenging?
I think it's organic, because I think of myself as a storyteller. So that sometimes that story comes to me as a novel. Sometimes that story comes to me as a play. Sometimes it comes as a poem. But for example, I never intended to start writing novels. I'm trained as a playwright, and that's what I was doing. But I had an idea that was too big. You can't have 23 characters and 18 settings, because nobody can do it. In the movies, you can. On the stage of the theater, you can't. So that I wrote What Looks Like Crazy on an Ordinary Day, because I was very much wanting to tell that story about those characters. So I started writing novels, and then I wrote more novels. But my form that I really love the most is theater, because writing is ultimately kind of a solitary activity. You have to stop talking to other people about what you're going to write and sit down and actually write it. And then once you're done as a playwright, you get to come out and join a whole tribe of collaborative artists. You got actors and directors and designers, and you're all working together. And I love that collaboration. As a novelist, you don't get that. You write the book by yourself, people read it by themselves. As a poet, as a spoken word poet, it's the same as a playwright, I would think, where you get to have that exchange live with the audience, which is so wonderful, because, you know, when you write a novel, you don't know whether or not people receive it well. You can't hear them laugh at your jokes. You can't see whether or not they cry when somebody dies in your book. If you do a poem in front of a room full of people, then they're going to respond to what you say. You can hear them catch their breath when you surprise them. You know, you can see them feel sorry when you've made a story that surprises them. So that theater is the one, I think, where my heart is, just because it's something that we can all do together. But I understand that in every form, there's a way to reach different people. Some people who love poetry will never come to the theater. Some people who love the theater don't read novels. So that if I can touch all of them in one way, they don't have to read everything I do. If I can get them to read one thing, then I got up.
That is wonderful. I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
So we know there are millions upon millions upon millions of people who write, who never publish. How did you sustain yourself as a writer before you were published? Did you ever lose hope that you would never get your work out before the world? What really allowed you to continue to write, to create, to produce?
I never thought that I would be able to earn a living as a writer. I always knew I was a writer, and I've written my whole life. I mean, since I was a little tiny kid. So that I knew that's what I was and that's what I wanted to do. But I wasn't sure I could make a living at it, because how can you know? So I used to do a lot of other things. I type real fast. I was a secretary for a long time. I was a receptionist. I would answer the phones at offices. I did a lot of speech writing. I worked in politics. Politicians always need good writers to help them write speeches. So I did that. I did some advertising, which is interesting, but oftentimes they want you to sell stuff that you don't really want to sell to people. I mean, I had an offer to write some wonderful, for wonderful pay, to write some ads to sell Virginia Slims, which was a cigarette aimed at women.
Right.
And I couldn't possibly do that. I don't want to use my skill as a writer to get somebody to do something that's going to kill them. So that advertising was much harder. But I did a lot of things to make a living. I taught a lot because I always knew that whatever I was doing to make a living, I only had to do that for 8 hours a day. Those were the jobs I was looking for. At the end of that 8 hours, I had the rest of the night, I had the rest of the day. It was all my time for me to write, to find a writer's group, to begin talking to other writers. So I never lost, it was never a question of losing hope. I was always going to be a writer, and I was always going to write. The great blessing of my life has been that I've been able to find an audience who would sustain me by buying the books, coming to the, so I can actually make a living as a writer, which is just a great gift, because it's all I ever wanted to do. With that, having a chance to do it is really a blessing for me. I'm sorry, Chris, did you have something?
Oh, no, ma'am. I was listening.
So I'm wondering, and I want to make sure that the young scholars get their questions in. How did you find your audiences?
Well, I began since I was working in theater. When I studied theater actually at Howard University and at Spelman College. So that we always had a little theater group. We had, of course, the classes we had to go to and the plays that they would do on the main stage. But then, you know, there were always those of us who were saying, okay, let's meet in the green room. We're going to do this play, and we're going to do this radical street theater, and we're going to do this. So that we were always doing other work at the same time. So we were going out into the community. I mean, we used to drive the people were trying to shoot pool at the pool room near Howard University crazy, because they were trying to gamble and have a beer and play pool, and we were trying to talk about revolution and do a play in front of the pool hall. So that finding your audience means you also have to know the community. You know, is this the place where I can find my audience? Or maybe not the pool players, maybe I can find this group or that group. But to keep going out, anywhere people invited me to read, I would come and read. If they invited me to be a part of a festival like this one, I'm always looking for a chance to find other writers, to talk to other writers, and to build not only that audience, but my own feeling of the dialogue that we have. I want to talk to writers. You know, I want to know what young writers are writing about. I want to hear the wonderful work they're doing, because the more connected you are to other people, the wider that community grows of the people that are going to be looking for your work. Also, as a playwright, what I did was find a theater that was doing the kind of work that I liked. I started working with Just Us Theater Company, an African-American theater company in Atlanta. And I worked with them, and my husband and I became the artistic directors of that theater. And we ran it for so that we could build an audience. We could use that theater. We published a magazine, building audience, publishing people's work. So that it's really a question of commitment and determination and discipline and dedication. So that even if you have to do something else to make a living, don't let that define your life. That's 8 hours. And what we talk, when we talk in theater, we say that's a rent-paying gig. That doesn't have anything to do with being a great actor or a great director or a great writer. You know, this person, I know some great actors who are sometimes waiters, because that's a rent-paying gig. Everybody has to figure out a way to pay rent, feed yourself, take care of the needs that you have so that you can make a distinction. This is my real work. I'm a writer, but I will accept rent paying gigs so that I can live indoors, so that I can feed myself. And the only problem is when you start thinking those rent paying gigs define you, and you can't let that happen. Only let those be the things that pay your rent. The real work that you do is the writing that you do. The real life that you're living is the one that you can craft for yourself. That doesn't have anything to do with a boss except you. You get to be your own boss. And the thing that you'll find when you're working for yourself is you can be the hardest boss you ever have, because you'll make yourself work hard. You'll make yourself revise that poem. You'll make yourself get those words down on paper, because if you don't do it, nobody will. So you have to be your own boss. You have to be a kind boss. You have to be a good worker. You got to be everything. But you can do it because it's all in your head. That's what writers do. We carry around whole worlds in our heads, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. It makes people sometimes think you're a little odd, but that's too bad, because when the book is done, they'll know why you were in your room talking to yourself. When the play is on the stage, they'll know why they had to hear you talking to yourself and laughing at your own jokes. They'll understand. So do whatever you have to do to get that work done. It's you.
Miss Clegg, I really appreciate that story as a Howard Law grad. So thank you for invoking HU. For sure.
Love Howard. I love that. That's really the place where I said, okay, this life in this theater, this life is for me. I had wonderful playwriting teachers at Howard University. Their theater department was great. Felicia Rashad and I were in the same class, same freshman class at Howard University. And we started working, and we've been working together ever since. We had a production. She was going to direct a play of mine in Los Angeles, and then the pandemic hit, so we had to push it back. But it was the play that Blues for an Alabama Sky, and she originated that role. And now she's directing, so she was going to have a chance 20 years later to direct it. Wow. So we're still looking forward to that once everybody's healthy and we can take off our masks and come outside and hug each other and go back to the theater.
That's right. Well, listen, we have about 7 more minutes with you, so I want to make sure that if Layla, Chris, and Liz have any more questions, they put them before you.
Do you have anything else that you'd like to share in terms of something that you've written? You don't have to, not a test question. I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot at all, right? Because questions are fine.
I wouldn't mind reading another piece. Maybe I could read a piece from my book that I published.
I would love to hear it.
Okay, I need to look for it.
See, and that's the right thing. You did the right thing. Whenever anybody says, do you have something else you'd like to read? You have to say, yeah, I do. I do.
Liz, while Layla is looking for that, why don't you share a little bit about the creative writing program at the Cleveland School of the Arts?
So School of the Arts has 7 majors. They vary all over. We have orchestra and visual arts and theater and all of that. But the creative writing department specializes in all of the art forms. We do playwriting, we do short fiction, novel writing, poetry. We explore all kinds of genres. I would say that we have quite a few poets and spoken word artists, Layla being one of them. In the last 5 years since I've joined the program, we've published, I would say, close to 20 books, about 2 anthologies a year, independently publishing. And then the students get really excited to publish their own works as well. So whenever they come up with an independent project, like Layla has last year, and an idea for their project, they're welcome to work on it separately with me, and then we do editing and an idea for it, and then we publish on their own. And they also participate in many events with Lake Erie Inc. We partner with 12 literary arts in the community. We do public events, Winterfest in the community. There are a lot of cultural programs here that we've partnered with. We're really excited this year to also join with GLAAWC. So we're really trying to develop our skills, not just within the school, but become part of like a greater writing community, and then strengthen those partnerships. So I'm always looking for ways for them to expand who they know and where their voice can go. In particular, this year, we're focused on a course called Writing for Change and how they can utilize their voices as an agent of change. And then we're going to publish an anthology with those pieces. And then we're looking at nonprofit organizations through their choosing of where we can use proceeds to send some of the money from the book sales to an organization that they want to support. So using the voice and the word as an agent of change, but then also seeing how we can use our entrepreneurial skills through art to also make change. So especially in this year that we know has been really, showing, our writers that they have so much power in their hands as youth. And I think today they've showcased it. This is 2 out of about 35 kids who are astounding people to know. They make me a better writer every day. And it's a blessing to be with them.
Thank you, Liz. All right, Layla.
Okay, so this is my book. It's called I'll Love You Again Someday.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I will be reading the piece called You. He stood in front of the mirror, you on the other side. He was in awe, gazing at your beautiful skin and natural hair that wasn't done, admiring each and every feature you had, though you were disgusted by the roundness of your stomach that didn't look right in swimsuits, poked out through tight clothes and loose skin that distorted your Coke bottle dreams. He loved it. He admired the scars on your arm that symbolized the survival through hard times, knowing that when he was at dark times, unable to control his emotions, you could make him feel better because you've already overcome that pain. He found that beautiful. He stared at the tears and reached towards the mirror, wishing to wipe away your insecurities because you are too gorgeous to hate yourself. The dark bags under your eyes, the unique marks that stain your body, the ugly laugh and weird nose, the tummy that isn't too flat, the arms that aren't the right size, the shoulders that look too manly, the depression that brings a constant frown, the oversized foreheads, and the fingernails bit to the stubs were all his favorite part about you. He loved every single part about you. No other person will be as beautiful as you. Nobody will look like you, sound like you, act like you, be like you. He constantly repeated. She gazed deeply into the mirror. The reflection of him was herself. She finally separated her lips and said, I love me. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Wow.
That was beautiful. That was so good. Oh, you all are just good. I don't even know what to tell you. That was lovely. Just beautiful. That's what I'm talking about. Details, the details of everything. All those details that make all of us who worry about how perfect or imperfect we are say, yep, know that stomach, yep, know those arms, yep, know that, yes, all of that. Thank you so much for sharing that, and congratulations on your book. Absolutely. That's a beautiful piece. Thank you.
That's beautiful. So Chris, Deontay, Layla, any final questions for Ms. Clegg?
I had one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I haven't written a whole lot, but I do like to write songs. And I love music, musician, and I like to write songs and seeing the outcome at the end and stuff. But I just want to know, like, have you ever has music ever inspired you, or have you ever written a piece based on music, or written songs that you made a poem or something, music just really spoke to you or something in a way that you'd be able to write? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I listen to music a lot. I love music. I love concerts. I love to listen to music, but I have no music in me. I mean, anyone who has ever heard me sing will tell you I have no music in me. But I think that writing music is the same, requires the same kind of skill that writing without music does, because you still have to look at people, you have to look at yourself, you have to find a rhythm, you have to find the right words, so that if songs are what come to you, then write songs and see how that goes. See what the lyrics are in terms of what your writing is going to be. Whatever calls to you, do that, and then you'll see the best part of your writing will come out. So if you're thinking of songs, thinking of lyrics, definitely write all of that, because it's all writing. It all starts with what it is you're trying to say, and if you can also add music, that's just a wonderful thing, because that's another way that people communicate with each other, and sometimes even more powerful than words is the music. So if you can do both, do it. You're very lucky. Keep pursuing that.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Um, when you first started writing, how did you find your voice, like your authentic voice?
I think that it takes a long time, because when I first started writing, I was just trying to figure out how to do it. So you have to find your voice by doing, by writing more, by not getting hung up on, okay, is this one perfect? Does this sound perfectly like me? But try to get it as close to your authentic self as possible, and learn what you can from every piece, and then move on to the next one. Because the best way to find your voice is to keep using it, to keep using it in as many ways as you can. So that the thing that I think inhibits many people who want to write and who could be good at it is they wait for it to be perfect. Is it all done perfectly? And it's almost never exactly what we want it to be. But we have to fall back on, what did I learn from this piece? It might not be exactly what I wanted, but I learned a lot about dialogue on this play. I learned a lot about how to talk about love in this poem. I learned a lot about looking at family in this novel. So that I think that finding my voice was a process of making myself use it, making myself use it. And I look back at things that I've written a long time ago, and I can see myself getting closer, which is always lovely, because it never stops. You continue as a writer to grow. That's why I always resist when people say, well, are you done now? And it's like, no, I can't be done. This is what I do. This is not a job that you retire from. This is one where you get to be 50 and say, oh, I'm almost to my voice. Then you get to be 60 and say, I think I'm getting there. Then you get to be like me and you're 70 and you say, I think I'm this close. But you got to keep doing it. So I figure by the time I'm about 90, 92, I'm going to be I'll be ready.
I think you.
It's a great life, though. Just to try to spend time finding your own voice. What a great life. So that's what we do. And that's a worthwhile pursuit for any human being, talented as you all are.
Can we
Thank
give
you.
Ms. Clegg a round of applause for her graciousness this afternoon?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I give you all applause for being the future of all of this. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm very glad to have met you, and I'm going to look for your names, look for your words. So don't stop, okay?
Ms. Clegg, the students that you've met this afternoon will participate in the Great Lakes African American Writers Conference Youth Spoken Word Competition this evening. It will start at 6 o'clock, and so we encourage you to tune in to see 11 dynamic spoken word artists, 6 from Cleveland, 5 from Pittsburgh. They're going to go head to head for bragging rights. If you happen to be a fan of the NFL, you know that is representative of the Browns versus the Steelers. And so do join us. And for those who are with us and viewing, hold on just a little while longer, because we have a special presentation to make right now. The occasion is the Great Lakes African American Writers Conference presentation of the Alice Dunbar Nelson Lifetime Achievement Award to Pearl Cleage on Friday, October 2nd, 2020. GLAAWC is pleased to present the 3rd annual Alice Dunbar Nelson Lifetime Achievement Award to esteemed poet, essayist, novelist, and playwright Pearl Cleage. To our sponsors and institutional partners, for the third year, GLAAW-C is an official entry in the Cleveland Book Week, sponsored by the Cleveland Foundation, and for this we are grateful. This award is named after poet, journalist, and political activist Alice Ruth Moore Dunbar Nelson. Born in 1875, Alice Dunbar Nelson served as an inspirational figure who left her mark on literature, journalism, political activism, and the AME Church, having served as writer and co-editor for the AME Review. Twice married to poets, including the Black Buckeye and Negro Nobel laureate of his time, Paul Laurence Dunbar of Dayton, Alice's story resonates in an era of heightened awareness of the travails of being a woman and being an African American in a country prone to violence against people of color, including women and trans women and immigrants who are othered and dehumanized. The full story and richness of her life is colored with triumph and tragedy. I encourage you to read her story. We salute Alice Dunbar Nelson by naming this award in her honor because her achievements for a woman born in the late 1800s were exceptional. Her professional careers were rarefied for a Negro woman. Last year, we honored the prolific poet Carl Phillips, who lyrically cracks open themes of spirituality, sexuality, morality, and faith. The first recipient was poet laureate and Akron native Rita Dove, whose work alongside this year's recipient, Pearl Cleage, is honored among the Traveling Stanzas thread found on the GLAAWC website created by Kent State's Wick Poetry Center. This creative writing prompt is a celebration of African American literature at its finest. You will also find the work of playwright August Wilson there. As an African American playwright, essayist, novelist, poet, and political activist, Ms. Cleage is a fine recipient of the Alice Dunbar Nelson Lifetime Achievement Award. She is currently the playwright in residence at Alliance Theater and at the Just Us Theater Company. In conjunction with her writing, Cleage is a political activist. She tackles issues at the crux of racism and sexism and is known for her feminist views, particularly regarding her identity as an African American woman. Her works are highly anthologized and have been subject to many scholarly analysis. Many of her works across several genres have earned both popular and critical acclaim. Notably, her novel, What Looks Like Crazy on an Ordinary Day, was a 1998 Oprah's Book Club selection. Ms. Cleage is a member of a small niche of African American female playwrights. She had her introduction to playwriting in the 1980s, producing her first play, Puppet Play, in 1981, which was followed by Hospice, Good News, Essentials. In the 1990s, she produced three of her most well-known works, Flying West, which will air on Sunday to close out GLAAWC 2020, Blues for an Alabama Sky, and Bourbon at the Border at the Alliance Theater in partnership with artistic director Kenny Leon. Flying West has since surpassed a dozen productions all over the country, including a run at the Kennedy Center and other notable productions in New York and Atlanta. It was the most produced play in 1994. As mentioned on Sunday, GLAAWC will air the first virtual production of Flying West by the Pittsburgh-based Damascus Theater Collective. In 1996, Blues for an Alabama Sky was performed at the Cultural Olympiad, coinciding with the Summer Olympics held in Atlanta that year. Ms. Cleage has also made significant journalistic contributions and is the founder of the literary magazine Catalyst and has been its editor since 1987. There's so much more I can say about Miss Clegg, but I want her to put that award down and rest her arms. And so I say to you, Miss Clegg, thank you for being the keynote speaker of GLAAW-C 2020, performing and engaging our students in this colloquia, and agreeing to be the third recipient of the Alice Dunbar Nelson Lifetime Achievement Award.
Thank you so much. I'm deeply honored. I admire her so much. I admire her tenacity, her career, and her writing. So I thank you so much for this award. It's beautiful, and it will definitely have a place of honor in my office.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome. It is our pleasure. And we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at 3 p.m. sharp for your keynote for GLAAW-C 2020. Until then, be well, rest well, and we look forward to hearing more of what you have to share.
Thank you.
God bless. Thank you all. We look forward to you joining us this evening at 6 p.m. for the GLAAW-C, that is the Great Lakes African American Writers Conference Youth Spoken Word Competition. We will have 11 contestants, 6 from Cleveland, 5 from Pittsburgh, going head to head. Join us for what will be a remarkable evening of spoken word. Take care, God bless, and Godspeed.